So, Lee Frame attended the University of Michigan on a Navy ROTC scholarship. After graduating, he served in the U.S. Navy for 30 years, including the tour as the captain of a nuclear-powered missile submarine. After retiring from the Navy after 30 years, he served 11 years as the senior civilian in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, overseeing all of the testing done on new DoD weapon systems. During that time, he also served on several county committees in Fairfax County. And after retiring from federal service and moving here to the Lake of the Woods, he became involved in the local community, serving as both a director and president of the Lake of the Woods Association. He's a lifetime member of the Lake of the Woods Rescue Squad and served as its captain for 2 years. He's an active member of Low Lions, the local art chapter, the Low Veterans Club, and as we all are aware and very grateful, he often performs on the stage for the Lake of the Woods players. He became involved in Orange County governing when he was appointed to the Planning Committee back in 2005, and 2 years later he was elected to the Board of Supervisors. He's in his 13th year as serving as the Orange County Supervisor for District 5, which includes Lake of the Woods. He's the chairman of the Orange County Health Commission, which is responsible for the operations of the Dogwood Nursing Home. He's chairman of the council for a 10-county region of Virginia Career Works that oversees federal and state-funded training for adult, youth, and dislocated workers. And finally, he serves on the boards of the Rapidan Service Authority and the Living Water Community Clinic. So our question, Lee, is when do you sleep? Please join me in welcoming Lee.
Carolyn. A lot of people wonder why would anybody go into politics, and I've had some really great jobs in my life, but I'll have to admit being county supervisor and all the things that go with it are really a lot of fun. I enjoy it. It's challenging at times, but I really do enjoy it. As I go through this talk, I would encourage you to ask questions as we go along. If you wait till the end, you'll forget it. Or by the time we get to the end, everybody's anxious to leave, and so you don't feel like you should be asking the questions. So ask them as we go along. First thing I'm going to talk about is the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan. A number of years ago, because we looked at the number of people in the county who didn't have jobs, who were in difficult financial situations, the number of children getting free and reduced price meals at the schools, we realized that we needed more industry or more businesses in the county. And we had a lot of resistance from many of the people in the county who wanted to keep it rural. They didn't want any more business. But in fact, we made several town hall presentations and decided that we would create the Germanna Wilderness Area Plan as sort of a annex to our comprehensive plan, which deals with how we govern in the county. But we put it all up at the end of the county, and as you can see, this is the area of the general Germanna Wilderness Plan. And all the rest of this county is pretty much rural. There's some businesses down in Orange and Gordonsville, and there's some commercial areas along here. But the Germanna Wilderness area is the area we're trying to develop.
And that's us, right?
What's that?
That's us.
That's us right here. That's this. That's Lake of the Woods, right in the center of this Germanna Wilderness area. And why we did it down here is, well, we have Route 3 along here, and that's a major corridor. And trying to put businesses in places that transportation isn't very easy business. And the other thing is we have public water and sewer here, and it's hard to get development in areas that don't have public water and sewer. Here's a close-up of that area. And you can see that it encompasses all this area on the other side of Route 3, and it goes clear up here a little bit beyond Flat Run and picks up a lot of this area clear out here. Much of this stuff here will be developed in the out years. This is a 50-year plan, so don't plan on most of us seeing the completion of this plan. But it is a now we broke this area up into a whole series of them. You can see we've got 8 different segments. And let me go ahead and go you a little more information on each segment. Okay, this is the one right up here, the thing. And this is Route 3. There's already some development along here. We're looking at some more residential in here, but rather very low density residential. We're not looking for a lot of building. And you can see around in some of this area here, they already have homes. And this is Signature Station. Over in this area is the Walmart. Signature Station is an area that got rezoned a while ago, and I don't think it's going to be ever developed because it's so low. It'll require a lot of fill. I don't know why they rezoned it, but they're paying a higher level of taxes on it, and I don't mind that. This is the next area further down. This area is fairly well built out. Some areas that we will probably do some conservation and keep a little bit over space. This is an area that we got quite a few years ago when we were having problems with the state on our dam, and they wanted us to turn our beautiful green dam into concrete. There was a lot of housing that was planned for in this area. And we worked with the developer and got him to move that out of the area where if our dam fails, that's where the water is going to flow. So this was sort of reducing the hazard level of our dam by not having a lot of houses in case it failed. And so we got the developer, we gave him a little higher density up here. He's kept the same number of homes, but he put it in a little closer, and because he didn't have to make as many streets or water and sewer lines, it actually cost him less, so it was a good deal for both of us.
Question.
Yes?
Where's Lake of the Woods compared to that?
Lake of the Woods is down over in here. This is an area up near the Culpeper border. This is where the Germanna Community College is going. Germanna Community College is planning an expansion. They're planning a new building. Apparently the state will only pay for the building. Won't pay for any roads going to it. Won't pay for a lot of other things. And so the people from their community college are out trying to scarf up additional support to pay for a lot of the other things like landscaping and roads. We also have this area over here that the Germanna Foundation is working to do archaeological work on the Enchanted Castle and the Germanna Fort. And we're hoping that at this point here, that even becomes an additional tourist attraction. We already have the Civil War, but everybody in Virginia's got the Civil War. But this is an area that's pre-revolutionary, and so we're hoping that we can build on that and help our tourism industry. This is the area where we expect the biggest segment of development. This is Route 3. This is the corner of 3 and 20 down here. And this is the area that we hope to see a lot. Now these were possible, I don't know if they'll really happen, but possible reservoirs. And I'll talk a little bit more about water later. But a planned town there. We have different categories of zoning, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But one of the things we really want to do is to get a lot of the local traffic off of Route 3. So we're looking at another road coming up in this area here, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this is the area that we expect to do. Now most of that is all owned by one person. Chip King and his sister Jan Evans owns that, and they own some other stuff over here that I'll talk about later. but it's got something like 2,700 acres. And we are anticipating a plan. Jim Crozier, one of the other supervisors who represents this side of Route 3, and I met with Chip King and Kenny Dotson, who's sort of Chip's rep here in Orange County. And they're developing guys. And I thought they were going to show us a plan. Well, they had a plan, but it was pretty rough, and we didn't see much of that. What they were really asking about is our new zoning categories, and they had a number of questions about the zoning categories. And so we spent a lot of time answering those. So at some point, they're going to be coming in with a plan, and I'm hoping that they don't just submit it to the Planning Commission and to the Department of Planning. I hope they come and try to talk to the supervisors, maybe have a town meeting or two, so that we can get some feedback on it before they get to it and get into a formal process, and then there's lots of problems with it. When I was in Fairfax County, I was on a land use advisory committee. And any development that came up would come to that land use advisory committee, and we would just ask questions. And the public would sit in there, and the public could ask the developer questions. And if they had things they didn't like, they told the developer, they didn't like that. And so we would have that meeting, and a month later he'd come back for another meeting, same group. Hopefully maybe have dealt with some of the issues that the public didn't like. And then, once we had it through that process, then it would go to the Planning Commission into the formal process. So I'm hoping that the Kings will do that here, but I have no guarantee on that. Here's the Lake of the Woods area. Of course, that's pretty much developed. There's a little bit area over in here that may see some more development. There's a low area though here that Mansour Azimapur is doing, which will be. He's already had that zone for quite a few years, and it's sort of been sitting there. My first time when I was on the board of directors here at Lake of the Woods, we were trying to combine the two, and it's been sitting there now for what, 16 years or something like that. Anyway, about the time we were doing that, the economy took a big dive, and we didn't get very far with it. This is the area on the other side of Flat Run. There's some build out there. I expect that this will be one of the later phases that get developed in the part of the Germanna Wilderness Plan. And this one is along Route 3, plan development there. There's some things already along here. We've already got some residential up here. It's pretty low density. That's all possible for development and open space. Again, no real definite plans for that. Just sort of, it's sort of there as a placeholder for the future. And then this is the last area. This gets down near the battlefield. So a lot of this is going to be under conservation and won't be developed. But one thing that we're concerned about, we'd like to do, and again, this intersection of 3 and 20 has its problems. And so we would like to try something different. One of the alternatives is to go right across here and right past the 7-Eleven and run this road back up in here. What we call a bypass or a throughway or something like that, so that this road will go clear up in here and avoid the traffic off of Route 3. We actually have a right-of-way in here. When the Walmart people said, no, pulled out of that space, they said, we're going to make you whole, we're going to do this. Well, they turned it over to the state, so we lost our tax revenue. But one of the things I managed to do with the lawyers who were working for Walmart and were just as ticked off as I was when they made that shift, I have us an easement or a right-of-way. So if we need to, we can connect the existing Route 20 across Route 3 and back up into this area over here. So back up, not into, over in this area here on the other side of Route 3. But an alternative is to come down here and do a crossover there and eliminate this one. Do a crossover of some kind here. And, but this gets awful close to people living up here in Lake of the Woods. And so if we do anything like this, I would insist on a big concrete wall as a sound barrier for that. Because you got the big semis be going up this hill and grinding their gears and stuff like that. It'd be pretty noisy for that. This property here is owned by Chip King and his sister, so there actually is a route through there to get down to Route 3. Now here's a little bit about how we've done because we have, this is our standard residential, standard zoning in the rest of the county. But to provide more flexibility for development, we created a new set of zoning categories: plan development business, plan development mixed use, and plan development traditional design, which is similar to Lake of the Woods. We put these in place, and it doesn't have all the same kind of constraints that the existing zoning categories have. And here's some of the things. This is what we had. You got special use permits, lot size, frontage. All of these things are specified in the old zoning categories. In the new zoning categories, far different kinds of things that we're looking at. Let me go back to the slide. You can see what we're looking at. Business, we want a flexibility, cohesiveness in the design, compatible commercial, institutional, residential, and recreational uses. That would be like a town hall or a town center. And then, of course, this is the planned development similar to what Lake of the Woods is. One of the things, let me go back another one here. One of the things that we do, normally somebody comes in and they say, this is what I want to do. If it's already zoned residential, commercial, whatever it is, all they got to do is follow all those rules, and they get to do it by right. One of the things that we've done here with these different categories is we're saying, you come in and show us a plan, and you lay everything out. And once we approve that plan, that becomes the zoning. And there's lots more flexibility for a developer in trying to put something together that makes sense in a modern development. And one of the things that is a major concern, and I mentioned earlier, was water. We have water down here. Our current water plant capacity is 1.6 million gallons a day. We can take 3 million gallons a day out of the Rapidan if we, once we get to the point of being able to process that much. Our current average usage is about 800,000 gallons, and on a peak we do almost 1 million gallons. So we say uncommitted, because we need some, I think, we need about 200,000, or that's about 1,000 units. Each, as we do planning, we say each residential unit uses 200 gallons per day. That doesn't really hold anymore because people have efficient dishwashers and washing machines and shower heads and stuff like that. And it's probably running closer to 160 gallons a day. But for planning purposes, we use 200. Last year we created 127 units. That may not have been 127 houses. That may have just been 110 houses and some businesses that use 3 or 4, something like that. And so, but you can see we're not too far away from having to do some planning for additional space. And I think we have somewhere along the Rapidan we've got an initial commitment from one of the landowners to give us property to build a new water plant. So that's one of the things. Our sewer plant has got 2 million gallons a day, so we've got a few more years on beyond that. Transportation, that's the other thing, Route 3. You can see we've got crossovers, we've got traffic signals. VDOT wants to make Route 3 straight through. Well, how do you get back and forth? Well,
Sorry, folks.
that has been their thrust, and they have new designs of intersections to make that happen. One of the thoughts is somewhere along in here, maybe putting a underpass that would handle, let's say, golf carts and bikes and pedestrians. That's a possibility. But they have different kinds of solutions that would remove some of these things. And these are way out in the future. But one of them that is sort of interesting, and we made a presentation to that. So if you're coming out of Lake of the Woods, you can't go across it. There won't be a light. You want to go over there, you're going to have to turn right, pull in the left-hand lane, turn around, come back and do that. But what happens, people are just going through and none of them have to stop. This is, as I say, you and I probably won't see that. I don't know if there's anybody young enough here that might see that. So, because when that happens, I don't want to listen to the complaints. But anyway, that is one of that's VDOT's strategy, and they really want to keep Route 3 going through a through traffic, and they're trying to do that all over the state, not just Lake of the Woods or Orange County. Okay, let's get off of GWAP and talk about the reassessment. One thing to remember about the reassessment: the primary purpose is to distribute the tax burden fairly. If we just went through and doubled everybody's assessment, and doubled everybody, we wouldn't be changing the tax burden. Everybody would be getting the same, whether you double it or you cut it in half. And some jurisdictions, not in Virginia, say 70% of the market value. Virginia says the market value. So really, the market value is just how do we level things. You know, if some properties have gone up in value, some have gone down, trying to make sure that the tax burden is equitably distributed. Now, some people were saying, well, it went up 18%. My property didn't go up that much last year. Well, last time this was done 4 years ago. And even a piece of property that is built, let's say 3 years after the reassessment, and property values have gone up, and sometimes they'll just drop it back down so it is comparable to everybody else. You don't want somebody who built a brand new house, which is on a different marketing scale. We don't want him to have to pay more than his share. So we do that every 4 years. Now, you don't have to read, this is all the state law. But basically, it says if the assessment goes up and causes your revenue to go up more than 1%, you have to have a public hearing just like a tax increase. And if you don't have a public hearing, you have to cut the tax rate so that the total revenue remains within 1% of what before it started. And that's something that we have seen a couple of times. We had a tax rate of somewhere around $1.20 a few years ago, and then it came down to about 80 cents. And so that's bounced up and down every time the reassessment changes. And we've seen more changes due to reassessment than we actually have from the standpoint of raising our actually tax rates. Last tax rate occurred about tax increase occurred about 5 or 6 years ago. Okay. This is probably not a good number because people still are finishing their appeal process. But that was the estimate, that the average county increase went up about 13%. So if that holds and you got a 20% increase, you're going to see tax increase. If you got a 10% increase, you're going to see a tax reduction. Now, you have the possibility to appeal that process. The original working with the assessment company, that's long since passed. And since we put that into place and didn't give people a lot of notice, they got their tax bill assessment, you know, and it seemed like 5 days later the cutoff disappeared for appealing it. But you still have the Board of Equalization. and originally came through with a March 15th date, and I said, since we made it real short before, we're going to lengthen it, so you've got till the end of March to do this. Now, your basis of appealing, only two things you can do. If it's inaccurate, if they say you got 3 bedrooms and you only got 2, if they say you got 2,400 square feet and you only got 1,800, any of those kinds of things, that is a basis for appeal if there is an error in them. And you can look on the GIS and see what they say about your property. The other is it's inequitable. When you look at a similar property, same age, same square footage, same number of rooms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, built at the same time, then, and he's assessed it a lot lower, that isn't equitable. And that is a basis for appeal. Now, I did that shortly after I moved to Lake of the Woods, before I got involved in county politics, and went to the Board of Equalization and basically made my case. And what they did is they had my property said, great view of the lake. Well, the guy next door had a great view too, but it didn't say that on his property card. And his was assessed at about $40,000 less than mine. Well, I went in and got the appeal, and I got it corrected. It saved me a couple $100 a year in taxes. That was just on the land value. So, what I would say, if you're interested in appealing it, go to the GIS on the county website. Find properties similar to yours. Year built, square footage, number of rooms, heating, air conditioning, all the garage, all of that stuff. And look and say, hey, this one's just like mine. Okay. And then take that down to the commissioner's office on that piece of property and look and see what they're assessed. And if they're about what you're assessed, then you're probably not going to get much of a thing. But if you look, I'm sure you can find some that'll be assessed lower than you. Because when I did my appeal, I looked at the ones that specifically reinforced my case. And I would encourage anybody to do that. But you can look at that. And then you can go down to the commissioner's office and compare assessments. Then you take all that data to the Board of Equalization and try to make your case for lowering your assessment. It's very interesting. We had a few years ago, they did the assessment, and everybody went down about 15%. They got all these complaints that said, you've devalued my property, and now I can't sell it. And then then when we raised it, somebody will complain, you raised it too much, I got to pay more taxes. This is one you can't win either way. All right, we do have a process for exemption, tax exemption for the elderly and the totally and permanently handicapped. If you're over 65. Income level, if you make less than $50,000 a year, it used to be 40, we just raised it to 50. Or if you have a net worth of 120, it used to be 90. So, and that doesn't include the value of your home. So if you're down at this level, $18,000 a year for $24,000, your exemptions are up to 90%. But when you get up closer to these values, that exemption drops down to about 10%. And there's a table that shows how that works. So if you are in a situation where you have less than 50,000 or 120,000, go look at the county ordinance and just look and see where you fit, because you might be eligible for tax exemption. Okay, new public safety building. This is the building where the artist's conception of it. And our 911 center is cramped, and it's in the basement of the Gordon building in town. So if we have flooding, guess what? 911 center goes out of commission. And our IT center is also there. So those were some primary reasons. Plus the sheriff is outgrowing his spaces. So we designed this, had this place built. We also need an emergency operations center. We have one in the lower level of the Gordon building, but again, if you're flooding, how are you going to control emergency if you're already in waist-deep water? Part of that was moving to this new building. It's under construction now. This is sort of what it was going to look like. Somebody's got, we're already going to be arguing about who we name this after. But this will be the outer facade, and I think it'll look pretty nice.
So where is that?
Where's it gonna be?
Where is it?
Okay, you know where the airport is?
Yeah.
Yes.
You go up to the airport, that's on the right. There's a road just beyond the airport that goes back to the park, and on the other side of that road is where this building is going. We had to negotiate with Helen Marie Taylor. She's in her 90s. If I'm ever going to sell or buy something, I want her negotiating for me. Anyway, the inside, you saw this area here, the top there. That'll be a big atrium kind of area, and this is, maybe it isn't going to look exactly like that, but we're going to have some things we can do with the floor to make it look nice, so we're doing that. In fact, I think in the next a week or two, Mark Johnson and I have been the ones that sort of following the design of this thing, and so we will be looking at what we're going to do with the interior. But let me go to the next slide here.
Lee,
Yes.
did you mention the name of the building?
We don't have a name yet.
Oh.
As I said, we will probably be fighting over who we name it.
Oh, okay. But you warned us that,
No.
like the Helen Taylor building?
No. If she hadn't negotiated so hard with us to get the land, we might do that, but no way.
I know she might have lowered the price.
Have we any idea how much that's going to cost?
Yes, we do. And we have that in a bond issue, and I think it's about 4 or 5 million. I don't remember the exact number. Anyway, this is our,
That's right.
in addition to being the, yeah,
The sheriff's office is still gonna be on Porter Road, or is it going to that?
the sheriff's office will be in that area as well, as will our fire and rescue offices. So we'll have fire and rescue, sheriff, 911 center, IT center, and it will, this room here will be our emergency operations center. It will also serve as the new boardroom for the supervisors. These chairs can come out. There are rooms there. There are TVs going to be on the wall, different places, so we can actually run an emergency operations out of there.
That means there's going to be a signal light on Route 20, right?
I don't think VDOT is concerned about Route 20 as they are about that, but that's, yeah, it could very well be, especially if the sheriff has to come out. One of the things that was a real concern about that is the sheriff wanted to, we had to arrange the roads and such that if he's got to skate out of there in a big hurry, we don't want to be running into people who are parked alongside the road for the parking there. This is what it nominally would look like inside the inside that boardroom area. This is what it looks like now. So construction is undergoing. We were hoping to have it done by November or so, but
Which year?
Huh?
Which year?
This year. If we make that, the contractor says he will make it. Our public works director, certainly not sure about it. But Kurt Hildebrand, who's following this, is keeping a tight eye on it and is pushing very hard. All right. Next, talk about broadband and public radio. A couple of years ago, we got a grant from the Federal Communications Commission to put fiber to all of our schools and to the libraries. So this is what we call our 4-fiber network. And to supply all the schools and the library, we needed 84 strands of fiber. We put in 288 strands. The big cost is, of course, putting it in. Putting in the the conduit that all this stuff flows through, that was the big expense. And by keeping it, by just adding the additional fiber, we gained that, and so we gained a lot of capability there fairly inexpensively, because most of the rest of that cost was covered by the FCC. One of the things that is a problem with broadband is the last mile. Running a conduit down a country road to pick up 6 houses, and you got to run 4 miles of it, just doesn't make economic sense. We did that for electricity many years ago, but that was the Rural Electrification Agency at the federal level that made that happen. We did that for phone lines, but the federal government told Ma Bell, you got to run it. And of course they ran it, but then they could charge all the urban areas a higher rate to pay for running all that line to the rural areas. With fiber and broadband, that same philosophy no longer holds in today's environment. So one of the things that we're looking at is the possibility of a wireless, and we are building a series of towers for our radio communications. One of the big expenses we're seeing, and that's running about $8 million, is all of our radios are pretty much obsolete. They use old technologies, and nobody's supporting them anymore, so we have to replace them all. And in doing that, we want to have we'll need a series of radio towers. And when we build those radio towers, we'll leave a little extra space for somebody to put wireless broadband on those same towers. That way we can get the operations, get the communications out to the farms, so the guy on the farm whose kid wants to do his homework doesn't have to come into McDonald's to do his homework. So that's part of trying to do that. And of course that's something we're trying to do all over the country. These are the high schools that have it, and these are the provisional locations of the towers and what kind of radius we would get from broadband communications there. Now, one of the other possibilities, let me go back now, we can still use this one. This one here, we have a conduit connection going to the back gate of Lake of the Woods. And there's a group within Lake of the Woods, Pete's on it, I sit in on it now and then, that are looking to say, how do we want to bring broadband, how do we want to bring fiber, what do we want to do within the lake? But as a possibility, we have can tie into the county's network and use that if they want to, if that's what their decision is.
Am I the only one who doesn't understand the advantage to me to have broadband at all? Is it too complicated to
No.
Yeah.
If you want to bring in Netflix or some of the other,
I have Netflix now.
and you have it on Comcast?
Yes.
Okay, so you have broadband. But
Oh.
broadband goes up to about 200 megabits, and we've got guys who do work at home that need gigabits.
Okay, so it isn't something that general population needs
Well,
to have.
and having fiber in your home probably adds a lot of value for resale. But again, the cost benefit is something I leave to Pete and his group. And other than providing the county connection to it, I'm staying out of that.
Thank you.
I set you up, Pete. I'm glad you did.
Follow him home.
All right. In many cases, we will have fiber optic going to various places. And yes?
I was wondering, are we going to ever get any other companies in here?
Anyone?
Any other companies, Verizon or somebody else, so we have competition?
That is part of the overall process that we're looking at. There's a group, a broadband working group, studying, can we get a competitive person to come in here and, you know, what, as Lee said, what advantages for having a fiber-based product rather than a cable-based product. So we are looking at those possibilities. We're way out yet from what that might be, but we've reached out to other companies, et cetera.
I've reached out to Verizon, Hotwire, and one or two others, and they're trying to figure out how we can get get competition going here in the lake.
The Comcast, I was without internet for a month, and I finally got them to come to the house. And my modem was only 6 weeks old, because I needed the new one, they said.
Well,
What
I mean,
did they do for me?
that's a part of it is, you know, and one of the things that the county has some concern is we put all those wires in, you know, if somebody's internet goes down, I don't want to call at 3 o'clock in the morning. So this is part of the county's issues, is how we are going to manage that. I mean, I'm sure I'm not going to have an internet department of the county. We will probably be contracting out for all of that to be done. But I want somebody who's got a phone number that people can reach, and there'll be somebody there 24/7. One of the things is we get the public radio. We're going to be trying to tie most of our public radio to these towers, and many of these towers will have fiber optics going to them. So the communications from the public safety center that I showed would go into the fiber system, go to these towers, and then go to the deputies and school buses and fire and rescue all over the county. We've got places where the deputy out there by himself and in trouble may not be able to talk to anybody. So part of the reason for all this improvement is to make sure that we've got that kind of an issue. And one of the things is, if a fiber optics get cut, we could go to and do some.
An alternate path.
What's that?
An alternate path.
Yeah, an alternate path, and I'll talk about that in a minute with regard to the internet. This sort of gives you here's the fiber.
Lee, can you move to your left?
Yeah, I need to, sorry about that. The schools, and here are the towers. We're going to have one over there by the by RSA. We'll be using the one on Clark Mountain, and we'll be putting one down near one of our waste disposal sites. So far, we have not had to go buy any property to do that. The one tank outside the RSA, RSA has agreed you can put antennas on that tank. That's a part of you know, the cooperation between RSA and the county. Besides, I'm on the RSA board, and that goes. Okay.
Lee, what is the time frame for the towers going in? Are they under construction now?
What's that?
What is the time frame for the towers going in?
Hopefully by, I think we've started some construction already. I think we'll probably be doing all of this sometime middle of next year before it's all together. The radio systems, because part of the expense is not only buying the radios, but installing them on all the vehicles, school buses, fire trucks, ambulances, deputies' cars. So that's all part of that.
Okay, so a follow-up, the wireless broadband capability seems to have some promise. Pete, is that part of what your study group is looking at?
Well, wireless is also dependent on a fiber backbone.
Yeah.
As is here, so that's.
And I wouldn't think that they'd want to be using wireless in Lake of the Woods. They've got too many trees. And it's hard to get wireless signals through the trees. And so they might have some, one of the options that different people have suggested is I would put a wireless transmitter on every other telephone pole and reach 5, 10 houses apiece. You know, there's a lot of different technologies that could be implemented there. This was just, we did a survey, we sent out, everybody said, hey, go ahead and see what your download speed is. And you can do that. You can go to some of these websites and they'll tell you how to go ahead and get your download speed. I think my download is like 200 meg and my upload is about 25 meg. So you can do that. And then that's places that responded. And here's what we got. We had 877 people do that. 25% had no service. Some didn't know what their speed was. And you saw how many people were satisfied with their service. So we've got some work ahead of us. Here's our phase one. This was the public schools. They're already hooked up. Phase two is getting the public safety system working. Phase three is getting tied up to the access point. Right now, the school gets its broadband through Verizon, ties into our fiber network. And I think the school pays $20,000 a month for that. $20,000 a month, I think they pay.
Whoa.
To do that. So once we get our own tie into the internet and getting up to the place in Culpeper, there's a couple of routes that we're looking at. And did we show that? No, that's the end of it. Let's see if I've got that. I thought I had that on one of these slides. No, I guess I don't. We're looking for a couple of ways to make the connection. One, we're working with REC, the electric company, doing that, and then we're working with another group out here at the western end of the county. What we want to do is pull a loop, so that if Johnny Backhoe cuts the thing, you can get your signal through the other part of the loop. So that's how we're planning that. That's all I have in my presentation. I thought I might mention something. How many people have seen those big orange signs, solar deliveries?
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you about what's going on, because you're probably going to read it in the paper. What happened is Spotsylvania, when they gave the solar power company a special use permit to put the solar plant up, they put a provision in there that says you couldn't use Orange Plank Road, or you couldn't use Rock Road. So that meant they had to come down into Orange County. And the reason they did is people at Fawn Lake didn't want these 30 or 40 trucks going down there, down in front of their area. And the Spotsylvania Board of Supervisors violated a whole bunch of things in doing this. So Orange County has got a lawsuit against. We filed that yesterday. I didn't have a chance to put it in there, but it talks about a variety of things to try to. Tony?
It seems like all the trucks are using flat run chips 01 as a cut through.
That's right. Well, now that's another problem. And so I talked to our VDOT resident engineer yesterday, and we may be able to find a way of making no through truck traffic. You can't stop truck traffic because there's some places that they'd have to get into there, but you may be able to stop through traffic. So we're working that one too. Anyway, so if you see that in the paper, I don't think we gave a press release, but I'm sure that somehow the press will get a hold of that one. Any questions about anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a plan of having a high school built in the area?
When we get enough population in 20 or 30 years.
Oh, I forget about all these houses being built and things.
Not enough, not enough. We're a little overcrowded on the school now, but not enough to split it into two. And so when we get to the point where we would have enough for, because we split it now, you may not have a football team, you may not have a whole bunch of things. So that's a part of it that we will be, and I have that question all the time, and I say, you and I probably aren't going to see it. Yes?
The solar power is going to the schools in Spotsylvania?
Solar power is going into the grid, the one from Spotsylvania. I think our school system is actually working on using some of their roofs for solar power, which will help reduce the electric rates to the school system. Yes?
Will the town center across the street likely happen during our lifetime?
What's that?
Will the town center across the
I
street
think
likely happen? in our
I'm
lifetime.
expecting to see a plan submitted to the county within the next few months. And how long it would take to actually start building and constructing, all really depends on the markets. We have done two things to try to encourage people. We did a retail study, and this retail study is, you'd be amazed what these people know about us. And they can look at the demographics of this area, and they say, well, you have this many people with, people coming back, kids coming back home, kids with new families, etc., retired alone. They just got all these categories, and how many in each category, and various retail. This fits the required model for some major retailers. So once we get the space over there, that's a part of it. We also had a study done on a hotel, and that looks like we could do maybe a 65-room hotel at this end. It would be, the study says that's a viable option for this end of the county. So those are the things that we're working to try to make this all happen.
Where would that be?
Yeah.
Right.
Lee, you mentioned the $20,000 that schools are currently paying, and you talked about the loop. I don't think you got to tell them what the difference will be once that loop is complete for our school internet service.
Oh, well, yeah, what they would do is if we get our own loop up to the center there in Ashburn, they'll pay the county broadband authority, but not $20,000 a month.
It goes way, way down.
That's right. I mean, one of the things, if Lake of the Woods decides to use the county system, we're going to charge you for backhaul. But we don't have to pay the entire investment because most of that has gone into the public radio safety system. Yes?
Earlier in your presentation, you identified some areas for possible water impoundment. Some of us that live here remember a few years ago when the river really didn't have enough water in it.
Well, a few years ago, we had enough water at this end. They didn't in the town of Orange.
Yeah, they had porta potties at the McDonald's.
In Orange.
Yeah,
Not here.
yeah.
No. We had to cut back ours because that's what the state told us to do. But we had plenty of water here. Because there's several other streams that flow into the Rapidan before they get here. So we didn't.
Is the Rapidan in a drought situation substantial enough to support all this development?
No, that's why we'll need an impoundment. So what you do is when there's plenty of water flowing, you pump it into an impoundment, and then you can draw it down. That's what the town of Orange did. They have a small impoundment there. So because they see the water dropping to levels they can't draw out of it, much more so than we do at this end, because there's more streams flowing into the Rapidan by the time it gets down to our end.
Another one, please. When you talk broadband, are you talking cell phone coverage as well?
No. Now, those towers may very well be used by cell phone companies too.
Well, that's where I was going.
Yeah, I mean, again, those are opportunities that we'll take if it's possible.
There are some of us living here in the lake. I live near Pete. I can't get a Verizon cell phone signal in my house with the leaves on the trees.
Yep. Yeah, and so that we have not looked at how we are going to sustain the cell phone system. We expect that industry people, when they know these towers are here, will use them. But even if these towers I have out there, they're probably not going to be good enough to get inside Lake of the Woods and the thing. We'll need some towers inside of the lake. And then you'll have to talk to Pete again about that. Thanks for being here, Pete.
Some year, I'm here 30 years, so it was a long time ago, when it was rumored that Lord and Taylor's was coming to Twin Falls. I'm joking, it's true. And IBM might even consider building. But the demographic breakdown included, this was the negative, Louisa County, they were primarily interested in income and education of the population so that they could draw on employees and so forth, and money. And is that still the case? Are we demographically still included with Louisa County?
As we look at it, when we study and when we do demographic studies, we do it, not even necessarily for the whole county, just
Big
this end.
guys do it.
Huh? Well, some of the other people may be doing it, but we're looking at it from our economic development standpoint to saying, okay, this is what we have, and we're going to various businesses and say, we have something that meets your needs.
But my question is that why we're attracting Burger King and not Whole Foods or something?
That's right. We don't have, you need enough rooftops. There's a question about rooftops. We look today, we wouldn't have enough rooftops for an Olive Garden, for instance.
Higher-end industries creating higher-paying jobs and so forth.
Yeah.
That's what we get. No more retail and another Walmart or
Well,
something.
that's a part of it. Is something like Walmart? Yeah, that doesn't pay big in jobs, but that is money that used to go out of the county, and now is staying in the county.
But
So that tax
that's
revenue is
my
staying in the
advantage.
county.
Well,
Yeah, Tony?
Just outside Walmart, they're clear cutting all by the light. What is going on there?
I don't know.
But did you see where they're clear
Yeah,
cutting?
I know, and the planning department has very strict instructions whenever they get submissions to let me know about them at this end of the county. So I keep, I bug the planning department and say, you get something down here, I want to know about it. I don't want to hear about it from my constituents, I want to know about it first. So all this other stuff is rumors. And, yes,
Well, you're talking about building for retail, but you don't have anybody who has said, I want to come here and put some parcel of land and open up my business. Well, how are we gonna build availability and then ask who's coming? Or are we gonna plan it so it's a beautiful place?
when I'm looking at the developer who's going to plan that area across from Route 3, he may or may not have a commitment from Whole Foods or Wegmans or somebody like that. He may or may not have a commitment. He just may say, that's a space I'm going to leave for a grocery store. Because that's what I want, and that's my planning, that's where a grocery store should be. And it may wait until you get more occupied rooftops, where a grocery chain would say, that's enough, I want to move there. Or they may not look and say, it's not enough today, but I'm looking at what your plan is for the next 5 years, and you're going to have more, and it'll be useful then, be economically viable then.
We don't know what we're gonna get then.
No. We can't, I mean, all of this is dependent upon what developers and what retailers and what various businesses want to do. What we can do is what I call provide the regulatory infrastructure. So we have the new zoning categories. We're working the plans for water and sewer. And VDOT is working the plans for transportation. So we can't say, yeah, I'd like this guy to come, but if he doesn't want to come, I can't make it.
I understand that your primary, very capable interest and effort is placed here. But what is happening in Route 20 and the rest of Orange? Are they going to continue to send the stuff on Route 3 and say, oh, they're not developing anything. You can't even find a good restaurant there. They've got this beautiful complex going up in there. And so, in your wildest dreams, how do we stop Route 3 becoming an extension of what it is further up the road?
Well, part of that is...
Culpeper doesn't have it. You go over the bridge, it's a beautiful country road. Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, we could say the way to do that was just stop development.
No, by
And
choosing
the other way
where it's going to
is
go.
planning it so that we put it back there and we have a developer says, I'm going to come in with a master plan that says this is how I'm going to do it. I mean, we've done things like, let me see if I've got one of those slides. I don't think I have it. I had one that showed some of the, I can't find it now. I had shown some of the roads we're trying to do, with a nice cross section. So, you know, we don't want, when I build that throughway on the other side of Route 3, I'd like that to be 4-lane divided with walking paths on both sides. That's the kind of stuff we want to do, as opposed to just allowing it to grow like they did in Central Park. That's what we're trying to avoid.
But I wished for the 700 acres would be an absolutely beautiful park with walking, supported by the county, for all the residents of the county at this end.
And how much can I raise your taxes? I mean,
You already did.
But you know, speaking of taxes, Orange County is benefiting a lot from Lake of the Woods because they have.
actually, I've done the calculations. We have about 23% of the population houses, and we pay maybe 25 or 26% of the taxes in the county.
I would think it's more than that,
No,
you know.
no. I did that very, very carefully, probably quite a few years ago, and when we get a new census, I'll do it again. But
Yeah, we used to be the major portion of population
You've got-
in the county.
we still are a major portion of the population, but when you talk about, you got places at the other end where guys have, you know, multi-hundred-acre estates and just one house. And so, you know, in terms of
The taxpayer.
yeah, they're paying, now, some of them have gone into land use, they put it into agricultural use, and so they don't pay as much in taxes. But that's a big part of it. No, I looked at that because I'd heard that story, that we pay all the taxes, and no, we don't. We pay a little more share than our number of houses would meet. And of course, since we've had a couple of $1 million houses on the lake, that may have changed that percentage. But, so as I said, when the next census come out, and with that census and this reassessment, I will look at that again.
Are the developers looking at any of the golf courses?
What's that, people?
Are the developers looking at any of the golf courses around here?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's a part of it, is, you know, the attractiveness of having golf courses available, having, you know, one of the nice things about when we come up with this plan for this area on the other side is I want to see walking paths. I want to see open area. I mean, that's a part of it. And the guy comes in, it's all solid in with the development. No. I mean, and the fact is that the developers who want to sell premium homes can't just stack everybody up, you know, elbow to elbow. They want to have amenities. They want to have open space, places where people can, you know, bike and run and all of that. Well, those are things that we will consider as any developer presents anything here.
Well, I hope they just don't put another 200 of Mansouri houses next door to Walmart.
Yes.
Quick question, you said there was gonna be a new building in the Germanna. Scott, is that for the purpose of medical, nursing, or?
Yeah, that's the
Right?
primary,
That's been going on for about 4 or 5 years.
And, yeah, and we're looking at, okay, how can we build on that, having testing labs and having, you know, clinics and things like that that would be work in conjunction with that. I certainly could use some nursing. I'm on the chairman of the nursing home, and I just got an email saying that they're having a hard time with their evening shift. They just lost 3 nurses. Yes?
Is there anybody working on trying to bring industry into Orange County?
Yes.
Are we offering people discounts on taxes or something?
Yep, we do. We got Aerojet in here. There's a picture of me a few years ago handing a $300,000 check to Aerojet. Yeah, that was the state's money. We don't give money in advance. If you come in and say, all right, I'm going to improve my business by 50%, we'll say, okay, if you promise to build this much more business, this much more tax base, we may exempt the taxes on the additional construction for 3 years. That would be our thing. So we're not taking it out of our pocket. We're just deferring what we might get. And of course, usually there's a guarantee for a certain number of jobs and a certain price range on the jobs. I think when we did the ones for Aerojet, they had to have jobs that averaged somewhere around 60 or 75,000.
But there's no new plans, nothing.
We don't have any right now. I mean, we're continuing to work it. We've worked something, I think Aerojet, and we had one over at we had one by the airport there, the guys that are doing the, making the framing for roofs and stuff like that. They expanded. And there's a company in the industrial park that makes various kinds of adhesives and stuff like that, and they've expanded. And of course, those are really nice jobs.
We have, we've been here for 17 years, and like when we go to Walmart, my phone doesn't work in the store and in certain areas of the parking lot. And in those 17 years, Fredericksburg has been trying to get Trader Joe's. So how are we gonna attract anything out here if Fredericksburg can't attract Trader Joe's? I mean, if you go into Walmart and you can't text, or, you know, or a business, even Chick-fil-A, you can't even sit in Chick-fil-A and text unless we have any better communication.
And again, the county doesn't buy the communications. We can encourage it. That's part of what we're doing with the putting all these towers in. And if somebody wants to put cell phone antennas on those towers, we'd be glad to take the revenue. I mean, this is there are things that government can and cannot do. We can make the environment hospitable to various businesses, but unless they want to come, we're not going to be able to force it.
Yeah, but they gotta wanna come to something.
Anything else?
I know all that.
Yeah.
Any ideas on preserving the historic lands?
Yes, yes. I mean, we've got the Germanna Foundation took over a lot of land from the state, and so that will be preserved. You have the national parks doing that. I sometimes have trouble with a national park because they don't like to have horses on a Civil War battlefield. You know, so, yeah, and again, where people want to preserve it, we can look at it and say, you know, is that going to cost us a lot? You know, I'm in favor of it, but I'm not about to drive up our costs based on it. Yes.
The property next to Walmart that was cleared a long time ago,
Yeah.
for, I guess it was.
Yeah, that's what we call Signature Station.
Yeah.
That was rezoned. I think it was foolish on that guy's part to do that, because there's more taxes for us. But his, you know, what we put as a restriction on that is said, you've got to build the commercial and the residential in parallel. You can't just build all the residential and walk away. And then we're stuck with all the additional kids in school and stuff like that.
Right.
So part of that is you gotta bring them both up together. And he's not had much luck with that.
It just sat there, it was all clear, but it just sat there.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
I have a comment about retail. We were just chatting, and retail is really not expanding right now. They're actually closing stores. So I think everybody is just being very cautious, so it's unlikely something would happen right away. But my question is about the coronavirus. This is something that's in the news. And do we have any kind of plans in the county if we were to have?
We have our health department. They have, I mean, the kinds of things they use to check for sexually transmitted diseases. It's the same kind of thing you track and say, well, who did you meet with last week? What people have you had contact with? Those are, I mean, those are tools that we have in our health system, in the county, in the state, in the government. You know, now, would we have to augment that? Probably, but much of the infrastructure of how we do things, it already exists.
I thought that there was special equipment that they would need to accurately test this particular.
That's right, and so that would be something.
Do we have, I mean, does anybody send anything out to say we have it available in the state or?
I don't know if the state has it, I don't know if the feds have it.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that would be, you know, if somebody says that's a necessity, if we're that concerned about it, then I'm sure that the feds are gonna say, all right, go for a grant, and we would do that. There were grants.
Call Mike Spence.
What's that?
Call the vice president, he's in charge.
All right.
Yeah.
I know when to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say compliments to you for your articles in the Lake Current. They're most interesting, specific to Orange County, and then some of them are specific to Lake of the Woods.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very fortunate. None of the other supervisors has that kind of a vehicle available to them to talk to their constituents. And people I don't know are saying, well, I like your last article, and I said, are you one of my constituents? Because, and I hope they're useful. I put a lot of time into them. When I ran for election the first time, my predecessor, I was on the board of directors here, and we used to bug my predecessor with, we need an article, please send us an article, you know. And we would get maybe one article every 6-8 months or something like that. He'd submit one. And so when I ran for election, I said, I'm going to do one article a month. Well, it's about every 2 weeks now. Yeah. And I'm afraid to not have one because people will say, what happened to my article? Anyway, thank you. Anything else? All right, I hope you enjoyed it. So.